session ran just a little bit longer than anticipated. But the meeting of the Board of Supervisors of the County of Del Norte, State of California is now meeting in regular session, and only those items that are scheduled will be heard at that specific time. All other items may be taken out of sequence for staff and public availability. I would like to ask you all to please join with me in a moment of reflection and perhaps including any of your special intentions. Thank you. And now I would ask you all to please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance led by Steve Perez. Steve. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Steve. And everyone else for joining in. Well, we got a full audience here today, and I appreciate you opening the door to let a little fresh air in. It's always good. At this time, I would ask for a report of any actions from County Council in closed session.
No reportable action. Okay.
At this time, the chair would request any deletions, additions, or subtractions from, I guess that is deletions, from the agenda. In order for an item to be placed on the agenda at this time, it would and require action, it would have to have arisen subsequent to posting the agenda and require action prior to our next meeting. Any such items like that? Okay, there is item number 10 and item number 17. There's some redundancy there. So while they tackle the same issue, we are going to go ahead and delete item number 10 and take it up under 17. At the any introduction of new employees?
Well, he's not our employee, but the new chief of Crescent City is here and would like to introduce himself to the board. Chief Menzel.
Welcome.
Good morning, sir. Good morning to fellow board members, and good morning to the audience. I'm Chief Ivan Menzel. I'm the chief of Crescent City, as you know, and I've been on duty here for about two months and 2 weeks. As you know, I retired from the Los Angeles Police Department with 33.5 years, and when I got a call to come up here and be the chief, so I consider it to be an honor to be the chief of Crescent City. I look forward to working with my fellow partners in public safety and working with this board in making both the city and the county a better place to live for all our constituents. So thank you very much for everything.
Chief, thank you. Appreciate you being here too. Okay, I'm going to try to, I know we have a consent agenda with several proclamations and we want to talk to members of the public here. I think we're going to move things around. I'll ask for a brief report from the County Administrative Officer at this time.
Over the last couple of weeks, been working on a number of different items, primarily though focusing on our budget, and I'll give a short report during the budget period, but had a number of meetings with members of the public, different departments, discussions in regards to different policies and procedures. Had a meeting with the 2x2 of the city and the county regarding the healthcare district. Had a meeting with the executive director of the Child Care Council. Attended a visitors volunteer luncheon yesterday. Got information in regards to this upcoming summer and was able to play in the CASA tournament.
Very good, thank you. We're going to go ahead and take the consent agenda at this time. Can I get a motion on the consent agenda, please?
I move to approve.
Can I get a second?
Chair, if I could, I'd
Yes.
like to have item number 8 pulled for a separate vote.
Okay, and item number 8 is regarding the solid waste public member. Sure. Anything else on the consent agenda? Can I get a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Public discussion, public comment. Anybody have any comments on anything on the consent agenda except for item number 8? No? Back to the board. Comments? Poll the vote, please.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor McClure? Yes. Chair Finnegan?
Yes, except for abstaining on item number 6, which I had a conflict. And with that, within the consent agenda, there were some proclamations, and I would like to start with the one, number 3, which is adopt the proclamation declaring May 2015 as Mental Health Month, as requested by the Director of Health and Human Services and Supervisor Hemmingson. Please.
Yes, I have my tie on. This is a proclamation of Mental Health Month, May 2015. Whereas mental health is essential to the overall health of Del Norte County, resulting in productive activities, fulfilling relationships, and the ability to adapt to change and cope with adversity, and 1 in 4 American adults are affected by mental illness. And our local mental health board and other emphasize the importance of promoting mental health and the early identification of mental illness. And whereas mental health problems do not discriminate, they affect people regardless of race, creed, age, lifestyle, or economic status. And mental health recovery is possible with proper treatment and support, empowering mental health consumers to lead full and productive lives. And the County of Del Norte has made a commitment to the community-based systems of mental health care in which all residents can receive high-quality and consumer-centered services, and takes pride in its history of upholding the dignity and civil rights of all its people, including those coping with mental illness. Whereas as many as 8 million Americans who have serious mental illness do not receive adequate treatment each year, and people who have untreated mental health issues use more general health services than those who receive mental health services when they need them. And whereas mental health illness should not be shrouded in stigma and discrimination, causing those who are affected to not seek care, with suicide being the 3rd leading cause of death of young people. The County of Del Norte observes Mental Health Month every May to raise awareness and understanding of mental health. And whereas we recommend the Department of Mental Health and Human Services Mental Health Branch, our local mental health board, and all the community partner organizations, whether private, faith-based, or governmental, and individuals and family members, for their outstanding work improving the quality of life for mentally disabled individuals in our community. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Supervisors of the County of Del Norte that May 2015 is hereby proclaimed as Mental Health Month throughout Del Norte County, and calls upon its citizens, government agencies, public and private institutions, businesses, and schools to recommit our community to increase awareness and understanding of mental illness and the need for appropriate and accessible services for all people with mental illness. Passed and adopted this 12th day of May 2015.
I just have some ribbons here to match Supervisor Hemmingson's tie.
Didn't want you to think it was a conspiracy, so I left my tie on my desk, instead got a little green in this one.
Just a quick word. My name is Richard Day. I'm currently the...
Why don't you go ahead and start over so we can catch you in the mic.
My name is Richard Day, and I'm currently the Vice Chair of the Mental Health Board. Gone a long ways in the last year since I first saw you folks. Still as nervous as I was last year, but still, I'd like to accept this proclamation and all our thanks, both those who need the services like myself and others, and those who work with us. Thank you.
Thank you. We had another proclamation I'm going to ask Supervisor McClure to read regarding foster care.
Yes, thank you. Proclaiming foster parent appreciation during the National Foster Care Month of May 2015. Whereas the family serves as the primary source of love, identity, self-esteem, and support, and is the very foundation of our communities and our county. And whereas in Del Norte County, there are 76 children and youth in foster care who deserve the best opportunities that can be provided, as well as a safe, secure, and stable home, possessing the compassion and the nurture of a foster family. Whereas all children and youth in foster care need a positive, meaningful connection to a caring adult who becomes a supporting and lasting presence in their lives. And whereas dedicated foster families help fulfill a vital role by providing guidance, stability, and love, which helps children and families heal and reconnect, resulting in the launch of young people into successful adulthood. And whereas dedicated foster families frequently adopt foster children, resulting in a continuous greater need for more foster families. And whereas there are countless individuals, public and private organizations, and often unsung heroes who work to increase public awareness of the needs of children that are living in foster care. And whereas as well as the enduring valuable contribution of foster parents, kinship, adoptive homes, in the foster care system is only as good as those who choose to be part of it. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaim Foster Parent Appreciation during Foster Care Month in Del Norte County and urge all citizens to join us in helping to change the life of children and youth in foster care by volunteering their talents and energies on behalf of foster care, foster parents, and child welfare, passed and adopted by the Board of Supervisors, Del Norte County, on this 12th day of May. Anyone?
My name is Daphne Williams. I am the licensing agent for Del Norte County, and we are going to bring up Michelle Moore, our foster parent mentor, trainer. She's also one of the foster parents that has adopted children, and we just want to thank her, as well as all the foster parents, for all that they've done. She is one of our senior foster parents.
13 years.
13 years.
Wow. 66 kids.
And she'll tell you all about that while I hand it off him.
I'm Michelle Moore, and thank you guys. Like Daphne said, I have done foster care for 13 years, and we've had over 66 children in our home. We have adopted 4 of them, so.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
I'll tell you, that deserves a round of applause. You know, on behalf of the board, not only with the proclamation, but our sincere thanks and gratitude to all that have served as foster parents, as well as a challenge to add to those numbers. I know that there's been a lot of talk in the media of late and sporadically of the need to fill the void for foster parents, for all the foster children that are out there. So I feel like I'm preaching to the choir because all of you know that, so maybe somebody on TV will do that and respond, and I certainly thank you for all that you do. So. Quickly, budget transfers, item 18 and 19. Can I get a motion, please? Can I get a motion on the budget transfers?
Yeah,
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved to approve budget transfers 0501 and 0502. Public comment? Back to the board. Hold the vote, please.
Supervisor McClure? Yes. Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Chair Finnegan?
Yes. I might also notate that there will be another proclamation, but that is scheduled as a timed item at 11 o'clock. And with that, we're going to go to public comment. 10:25, any member of the public may address the board on any item that is on or off the agenda. If it's in another spot in the agenda, you might want to hold it till that time. You don't have to. But at this time, public comment, please. No? Oh.
I'm Lori Ridgway. I live in Crescent City. I'm here to talk about the South Beach safety issues. Safety is a state of being safe. The condition of being protected against physical, social, spiritual, financial, political, emotional, occupational, psychological, educational, or other types. There's consequences of failure, damage, error, accidents, harm, or any other event that would be considered non-desirable. Safety can be also defined as the control of the recognized hazards to achieve an acceptable level of risk. This can take form of being protected from an event or from exposure to something that causes health or economical losses. It can include protection of people or their possessions. I hear a lot of talk about you, the board, helping children, and I think that you got a good foundation of doing that. That's where it starts, and that's where I've been trying to teach my children, and I use the beach as my classroom. And having the jet skiers down there without any sort of lawful supervision it's a detriment to everyone that's down there. During the event, there were a number of cases that didn't come up in the paper, that there was issues involved with them, public harassment by them, verbal harassment. Also, someone has witnessed that party off the street talking about people because they want to get the naysayers out of there because, you know, it's making trouble for them. But to have the majority pushed out because of a minority, it doesn't seem fair. I've got several people on this position, local and residents from Central Point, Ashland, Grants Pass, Santa Cruz, the list goes on. Oregon, a lot of Oregonians come down here to surf, and they do not feel safe with the jet skiers in the water. Kawasaki says in their owner's manual, do not operate in shallow water. Do not jump waves, can cause stress to the watercraft hull, causing it to crack. Yamaha says the same thing, but they require a 360 feet stopping distance. So if someone does come off their jet ski driving at 70 miles an hour, they don't know where the vehicle is going. That poses a problem to the people that are in the waves and on the beach. I went through some of the Del Norte County codes.
I'm going to ask you to wrap it up, please.
Okay. The county code says it's a passive recreational use area. I did look up the bathing beach law, and I did find something on that, but that's usually in the UK. I can give you more information on that. But
thank you very much. If you want to submit that petition to the clerk, she can put it with the other information on the same subject up in the board office.
Okay, I'll get a copy of it and send
Thank
it to
you very much. Any other public comment? No? Okay.
Chair, I had a request from Ted Ward that we discuss item number 8. That was pulled from Supervisor Hemmingson.
We will when we can, as soon as possible. Right now, though, we have a timed item at 10:30, which is to adopt the following items. Number 1, ordinance for the text amendment, Title 18 of the Del Norte County Code to amend the time period regarding political signs and other findings. Heidi?
Good morning. This is fairly straightforward. It was a request that was initiated with our Planning Commission. We brought it back to the board to determine whether or not you were on board with it, but conceptually it is to amend the sign ordinance to allow political signs in the county to be placed 45 days prior to the election rather than 60 days, which it is currently at. And this would make us consistent with the ordinance for the city of Crescent City, which would eliminate a lot of confusion on the part of candidates as far as when they can put up signs and, you know, where they put them up and so on. So if you have any questions.
Yeah, how come we didn't limit it to 15 days? 5, okay. Questions?
No, just to say, Heidi, good job, and I think this comes from our planning commission.
Yes.
It's consistency, and people don't have to worry whether one street's in the city and the other street right on the corner is not in the city, and it's, as you say, it's a bit confusing, so thank you for a job well done.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Is that a motion of approval?
It is.
Can I get a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the following items. The ordinance text, number 1, the findings A through C, and the Planning Commission staff report is requested by the Director of Community Development. Public comment on this? Nobody's tired of having signs in their yard? Okay, back to the board. Further comment? Poll the vote, please.
Supervisor McClure?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Finnegan?
Yes, which will take us back to item number 8, which was pulled by Supervisor Hemmingson. Supervisor Hemmingson.
Yes, I'm a little disappointed that there is no representation from the business community on the solid waste board. I think we've run into this before where businesses get left out of the loop, and I don't know this person who has applied, and I appreciate the application, but it appears to be that they're relatively one-dimensional, looking at organic waste, and as disappointed as I am in the budget, I think there needs to be someone there who can look at a financial statement or the business side of solid waste and have that expertise or at least the vision. So that's why I pulled out. I just can't be in favor, and I have nothing against the is it Mrs. Glore? I have nothing against her. I appreciate. I don't even know who she is. Just know her from the application. Hi.
Okay. Well, item number 8 is going to require a motion.
I move to approve.
And is there a second? I'll go ahead and second for discussion. Discussion.
I'm kind of in agreement with Supervisor Hemmingson in this respect. Generally, we try to place folks on commissions or committees with some previous background. Even though I have a great deal of respect for Ms. Glore and her work with the community, especially with the Food Council, I'm not necessarily sure this was the right fit, considering the breadth of applications that were available to the commission, but that's all I have to say on that point.
Mr. Chair, it's Dr. Glore. Credit where credit is due. Work hard to get those initials behind one's name. And she's eminently qualified in her field, which is foods. And I originally had gone on board on solid waste and proven her, and I've reconsidered. And I said, we absolutely, because it was the mandate of the Solid Waste Authority to have someone from the business community. And we don't. So I'm going to concur with my colleagues Howard and Hemmingson and reject this with all due respect to Dr. Glore. I think we need to have someone on the Solid Waste Authority who has a strong business background and comes from the public sector in that regard.
I'm going to chime in here because at the solid waste meeting, there were 6 applicants who were interviewed and scored by the commission, and it was for advisory only, and it was an opportunity to listen to what they had to say and see what they thought the direction of the community was. The only business person that was part of the interview process identified that there was no additional need for recycling in Delmark County, and identified that businesses should be the same as households in payment. So for me, that wasn't a good option, because I know that we need to continue to encourage Hambros, for instance, on how can we help them pull additional items out of the waste stream that can be recycled and not go over to White City. And by then, we would listen to everyone. There was a motion made. It was seconded. There was no additional motion made. The nominations were closed, and it was a unanimous vote. Never in the bylaws, there is nothing said that the public member has to be a business person. And I believe that there are experts on that panel that have information. I know that Mr. Gastineau understands spreadsheets and finance. I know that, you know, I'm a small business owner that I've been in business with my husband for over 35 years, but apparently that doesn't count. But the point is that there were applicants, there were a variety of people, and it was done in a fashion that works. And I know that Dr. Glore has run federal grants, state grants, and those are business decisions that you make. Those are government decisions. So I would encourage this board to let us get past this, because I want to get solid waste moving again. I don't want it to sit and languish. We have improvements that need to happen. We need to be helping our partners be better able to deliver their service. We need to be assisting Recology in, for instance, in trying to figure out how to get the cans so the lids aren't blowing off, so we're not blowing stuff down the street. We need to help Hambros to reduce their cost of taking waste to the landfill. And that's the business of solid waste, and it needs to get done. And I'm just absolutely floored that there's this issue about the business person when that has never been there before. That wasn't the requirement when Jack Reese was the alternate. You know, it's never been there. It's like some kind of made-up headset that this is happening. And I just find it absolutely unfortunate that this board would stoop to that kind of level and identify stuff that's not even written anywhere. It's not in a minute anywhere. It's not in a bylaw anywhere. This is not a requirement for the public to participate. That's almost like going back to the day that you only got to participate if you were a white guy and you owned land.
Well, it goes to show that you never know what the controversial item's going to be. You know, I don't have a dog in this fight. I usually try to go with process, and the only reason that's before the board now, it never used to be before the board. We left solid waste things to solid waste, which is a separate JPA, except that we staff two members of our board on their board. And then I think a couple of years ago, we asked that everything, including the budget, but especially the budget, I see a purpose for coming back and discussing with this board. But that everything had to be validated by the city and the county. So as far as process goes, I usually try to land on the side of that unless it's something extremely controversial that I'm passionate about. And it seems that we followed the process here, that the solid waste interviewed the people. I want to congratulate and thank Mary Wilson as a business person who served on that board previously. It was my understanding anyway, and correct me if I'm wrong, a unanimous decision by that board to recommend Dr. Gore, that it is not part of the bylaws that specifies what area of expertise that person has to come from, but rather somebody that the board, the solid waste board, feels can work together with them in a partnership. And it's further my understanding the city has voted on this and approved it. So I understand people getting to change their mind when there's good reason. For me, I just, like I said, I don't really have a dog in this fight. I think they followed process and did what they wanted to do, and I'm going to go along with the recommendation there, I think. But there is a motion and a second. I'm going to ask the public if they want to address any of this public comment.
Elizabeth Henry, I live in the county. I have attended solid waste meetings for almost 2 years and have not missed a meeting, I don't think. This is really shameful. The process was followed Supervisor Gitlin brought nothing up at that meeting about being a business owner or a business person. He voted yes. It was a unanimous decision to back off now. I don't understand why and how that should happen. You know, if you're going to put this requirement on, then you had better change the name of that position to business owner member. It no longer is a public member. If you look at what public means, it means community, it means unrestricted. And you are putting a restriction on the public member position. And I just think that is not proper, and I think Dr. Gore is here and you're having this discussion in front of somebody who went through the process, came out on top, and now you're questioning the validity of her qualifications. Yes, you are, Mr. Hemmingson. The other thing is, solid waste is moving. Delaware County got an exemption on food waste composting because we're too small. We have someone who understands that issue. This is perfect to move us in that direction. The business person on the board had no other interest than to double check the auditor's figures. That's what we did all last year. There was no movement at all. We paid $30,000 on a report that said the JPA is the most efficient and economical entity to run solid waste, and that's where that report stopped and nothing was done. Mr. Gitlin was the chair, Mary Wilson and Mike Sullivan were the majority, and nothing happened. If you want that to continue, and I think that's what's behind this, you'd like to see Mary Wilson back, you know, the same thing will probably happen. You know, I'm not, personally, I think she's fine, and she put in some effort, but it was all on accounting, not about vision. What should the Solid Waste Authority be doing? There was none of that. It was all about double-checking Mr. Ward, double-checking the county auditor, and any figure that came up in front of the Solid Waste Authority. And so we're stuck in the mud right now, and if you go in this direction, that's where we will stay.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Linda Sutter County, I find it unconscionable that you, Mr. Howard, and you, Mr. Hemmingson, you either can't read or you're just blatantly disrespectful to a doctor who has more intelligence and education than neither one of you put together. Thank you.
Next, please. And we're just, please keep it respectful.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Bill Lonsdale and I live in Crescent City, and I too have been attending Waste Management District meetings for a considerable amount of time. I'm a newcomer here, so I don't know a lot of the history that is evident in this, but it seemed clear to me that there's a division of opinion and even a division of ideology on the board as it existed before, and it's somewhat changed over time, back and forth between what Mrs. Wilson calls green and what she also would call business. I don't think that they're incompatible. But I'm a resident and I have residential service, and I didn't feel represented. As hard as Mrs. Wilson works, and I once told people that the only other person in public life around here that works harder at homework than she did was Supervisor McClure. And it's one of those things where you would hope that whoever Mrs. Wilson's replacement is would be as industrious as she was. But I disagreed a lot with her about which direction the price structure and the emphasis on the district itself was going. You know, I'm a residential client, and so I want somebody who will represent me. And people will argue, well, if we don't have a representative who's a business person, the business community is not represented. But the residential community can be represented by the members of the board. That's equally true for the business community. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And there are actually more people that need representation on the residential side than there are on the business side. However, there's more clout on the business side. So it's a dilemma. And I read the body language here, and I'm a little bit worried about what the outcome is going to be. But I will plead with your board and with my representative on the board that the residential users need representation, and that public member should represent the entire community, not just one faction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, please.
Steve Perez, resident of the county. The interesting dynamic here is that there is a board that's in place that's made a recommendation. And what we're basically saying here now is that we want to second guess their recommendation. Okay, and I get that part. Except for there, for me, is the issue of the one point that's already been made, and that is a public position. Now, I would think that a person representing the public would be an individual who would seek out the input from everybody in the public, who would seek counsel from individuals that are interested on the business side of this board and the activity, and also the rest of the public. I just get a feeling, and it causes me a little bit concerned, that we're trying to go in a particular direction, push something in a particular way, and in the process, probably leave somebody out who is really, really committed, who's really interested from the general public. If you want the participation of the public, and they're recruited, and they go through the process, and they're selected and nominated by a board, then what you're saying to that person is, well, we value your input, but only to a certain degree. Your volunteerism isn't exactly what we want. Then maybe we should have defined what we want that position to be like more clearly. But you opened it up to the public, and this is the nomination you got. I'm going to be really honest with you. It does not look good on you as leaders to reject what your board has brought to you. Just want to keep that before you.
Thank you. Next, please.
I'm Angela Glore. I live in the county. I want to briefly address two issues. First, I think other people have addressed the issue of the business owner. I am not a business owner, it's true. I have a lot of experience managing budgets. I understand them, I read them carefully, and I am fiscally responsible. But since there is no apparent record in bylaws or minutes that that is a requirement, it does not seem fair at this point to put that, and it does not seem a reasonable limitation, given that the majority of people that I would represent as public representative are not business owners, they are residents. But second, and more troubling to me, is this notion that somehow because I've been identified as a green candidate, I cannot also be a fiscally knowledgeable and responsible candidate. These two things are not mutually exclusive character traits. I think it demonstrates a lack of understanding about just what being green means. It is not this greenwashing, a marketing campaign that tells you that if you buy this water bottle, you're going to end climate change. It is making real change that makes not just an environmental difference, but often a financial savings. And I want to give three quick examples about that. My parents, when they built their dream house, which is not most people's, they were close to retirement. They knew they would be on a fixed income, and so they built accordingly. And what that meant to them is that they built exceptionally green house. And that, for them, that means that their big bank of solar-facing, south-facing windows means that they have almost no heating costs in winter, despite living in upstate New York. Their solar panels mean that they have an yearly electric bill of $35. All they pay are line fees. This was a financial decision and a green decision. Several months ago, our library in town decided to retrofit all of their light fixtures and light bulbs to make them more energy efficient. And you know what that's done? That has cut their electric bill considerably, which will leave them more money for years to come for the books and services they're supposed to be spending their budget on. And finally, an example that everyone here should be familiar with is that the school district, by working with Recology and being more aggressive about recycling in the schools, has saved thousands of dollars on their disposal costs. The green choice is often the financially responsible choice. And to make a claim that I cannot possibly understand finances just because I'm viewed as a green candidate is offensive and willfully ignorant of the money-saving possibilities of environmentally friendly choices. Despite my affinity to Kermit, and I do love that frog dearly, I do understand budgets, I understand contracts, and I can read financial statements with no problem. As I said in my answers to the board questionnaire, I have given money back on a federal grant. On my research grant for my doctorate, I had money left over and I sent it back because I am that there is not some there is not some magic wall between being an environmentalist and being financially literate and responsible.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item?
Norma Williams, Del Norte County resident, as well as chapter president of the Del Norte County Employees Association, SEIU 1021. I too have attended a lot of these solid waste management meetings in representation of the workers that are part of 1021. I have also agreed with some who have stated here that even though former Commissioner Wilson did a very good job in her position, in many ways and in many respects, she seemed to give the perception that she was only representing one interest and one interest only, and that was of the business community and not of the entire residents of Del Norte County. So in many ways, many of us felt that we were left out of the total equation. Though I did not personally attend the meeting, I did view it on YouTube, and I did see the whole process by which the entire board went through vetting the applicants and then eventually voted and unanimously approved, and that did include you, Supervisor Gitlin, approve of Dr. Glor. The only thing that I can say right now is what is troublesome to me by the three of you taking the positions that you're taking at this point is that it sends a very troubling and chilling effect to all residents here in Del Norte County that wish in the future to possibly serve on any county-related commission. You're basically now setting kind of a litmus test. Perhaps maybe that's what we should do with each and every single one of you. And it would not be the kind that you probably would pass. Also, in terms of county employees, you're also sending a very troublesome signal to county employees as well, and one that the union, from here on out, will now have to observe and have a wary position in the future. I do hope that you will reconsider your positions at this point in time. If there is, being very familiar with bylaws and contracts, if it isn't in there, it isn't in there. And to impose something that isn't in there is unfair, and in my opinion, illegal. Thank you.
Next, please. Please. So let's keep the applause down if we can till the end. Anybody else want to speak on this issue? All right, then I'm going to bring it back to the board for final comments. Who wants to go first?
I would be happy, and I apologize, Dr. Glor, that I did not put that in front of you. And I'm just going off your application. I was not going, I saw no financial background whatsoever on your application at all. I didn't see anything in there about it. And the whole, you know, the business community is part of our community also. They're people, just like everybody else. And I'm not saying that's in the bylaws or not in the bylaws, but we don't, in my opinion, now Supervisor McClure says she's a business person, and as we get into the budget later on in this agenda, you'll find out why I'm concerned about having that business person on the board. It's very important. This authority has gotten into problems before financially, and I want to make sure that they don't. And that is my concern. And it doesn't have to be necessarily a business person, but at least somebody that I'm confident with that has a financial background. And I'm fairly disappointed in the budget, and that there was no questioning by this board. My disappointment is not with Dr. Glore. I think it's wonderful that she applied and that she got approved. I think that, but my disappointment is with the Solid Waste Authority in the way that they approved, the way that they were approving applicants, or not approving applicants, I guess, in this particular case. So that's my disappointment. And I'm not trying to necessarily pick one side over the other. I think there's plenty of representation on that board, whether you think it's a green issue or a business issue. I think they can go hand in hand. So I'm disappointed in some of the comments that were made also.
Anybody else?
Just so I'm clear, the process that the Solid Waste Board went through for selection or nominations, there's no qualifications other than they're public.
18 and older.
18 and older.
A citizen of Delaware County, an adult citizen.
So, like I said, I worked with Angela for quite some period of time now. I respect her judgments. More importantly, I respect her efforts in the community as it concerns the Food Council. She's been a wonderful advocate for agriculture here in this community, more importantly for food sources that need to be more readily available to all. That being said, I understand Mr. Hemingson's concerns, and more importantly, I understand the concerns related to decisions that the Solid Waste Authority boards have made in the past that have come with a great deal of public concern over the past several years, long before I became a board member here. And those concerns have resonated and torn this community apart to a certain extent. And that has been disappointing as a public observer, and more importantly, has affected large businesses and small businesses alike with additional costs that we may or may not have needed at the time. And there's still some clarity issues that need to be made on the budget. And as Mr. Hemingson stated, and I will state again, I wasn't aware of the financial background and details that Angela has presented. I just was working off the resume before us. I also did not realize that there was more of an interest other than the green aspects. But I'd like to hear Supervisor Gitlin's comments before we close and possibly reconsider my decision.
Okay, I will. Comment. Thank you, Supervisor. There are a lot of things in play here. And I voted unanimously, but then that moment of truth came when I looked at the tally sheets. And they're public knowledge, and I urge you to do the same. That this Solid Waste Board is moving very much in a political sense. And it was outrageous. And I would like to make those tally sheets public of each and every one of you. I know I will make my tally sheet public to anybody in this room who asks. I judged each candidate fairly. Mea culpa. That did not happen on the Solid Waste Management Authority Board. Two Tuesdays, that date in question 2 Tuesdays back. That did not happen. 3 of my colleagues voted in a purely political manner. And I discovered this afterward, and it was more than disappointing. I have a great deal of respect for Dr. Glore. In her field, she's expert. But it's disappointing. I wasn't aware that this was going to take place today. I'm used to this world. This is my world. And it's changing. I think that's a good thing. Honest, robust discussion. Now, let me answer some of the questions with regard to some of you. Let's move on. Let's move on. I'm going to move on I'm going to bring to the attention of this board some gross irregularities on the solid waste management budget. I spent a lot of nights since I got this budget up at night looking at this. I'm going to make that public here so you can ask the same questions that I'm going to ask. As far as, and it was $33,000, let's make it perfectly clear, and another $5,000 to find out why $25,000 went missing. We've spent a lot of money. I have not heard one candidate even say they read the R3 report, except Mary Wilson. I've not heard anyone say, don't worry about it, we fixed it. Like a toothpick in my throat sideways, it sits. So my comment is, though I did, and I've mea culpa, I'm going to admit I made the mistake. I went ahead and I said, well, everything is fair, and I've reconsidered, and I'm going to admit that to you here, and that's what we do. We do reconsider our votes sometimes, and I'm going to tell you right now I did. So with all due respect to Dr. Glore, she is not the candidate who I think would best fit this mode, and I do believe we need a business person, not just a business person, but someone who knows how to read these. I'm not an accountant. I went to Auditor Controller Clinton Shad, and I said, Clinton, help me read this. What am I looking at this number, and what does this number mean? And he brought some light to my eyes. Now, do we turn a blind eye, close our ears, and say, don't worry about that, everything's fine? When I got on the Solid Waste Management Board, I said, I'm going to take the responsibility of saving folks money. I believed then, and I believe now, that a great deal of money can be saved by outsourcing some of the issues on those 4 options, which incidentally, our R3 report has reduced to 3 options. We cannot privatize because we're a general law county. So we cannot do that. It's not an option available to us. But there are 3 other options that have been summarily ignored in favor of let's move forward and hire a director. That's what I heard all of them say. Really? What about the combining of the positions? What about the $33,000 R3 report?
Supervisor Gitlin,
Supervisor
Gitlin, I'm going to let you finish, but I'm going to ask you that you stick to the topic because we will have a full discussion under the budget further on in the meeting. Thank you.
I've given you my reasons, and I'm going to stick to this reason. I'm going to right now is Dr. Glore gets my no vote.
Okay. Last comments.
Yes, I would love to take a last comment. I want to get back to process. And I want to get back to the original 9 applicants who applied for this position because there was an enormous amount of interest. And then for some reason, 3 of them dropped off, and there were different people from all different walks of life. And there were a set of questions that people were asked to answer. I know that there was, for instance, there was a young man on the applying that one of the solid waste members actually told, well, you're too young. You know, it's that kind of selective discrimination for me that I find incredibly appalling. And there's nowhere that it says it's a business person, but during the interview process, there was the talk and the discussion about managing the grants and reading and reading budgets and reading contracts. And so if you weren't there, that may be part of the reason that you may have missed it. But it was an advisory tally only. Chair Hawley made that very clear 3 times before the process even started. He would say, we're going to do these tally sheets, and that's going to be advisory only. Anybody can recommend and nominate whoever they would like to nominate. And then there was also even a printed out steps in the nomination process of how the votes would go according to Rosenberg's rules. And every candidate had waited in a separate room so they couldn't hear the other answers. And, you know, it was a process that ended up with someone being nominated. And for me, because I'm just back on the solid waste board, I'm hoping to move this forward. I'm hoping to take a look and let's finally put to bed the R3 report and do whatever it is we need to do, but not continue to dance in a circle and be pointing fingers and be angry and carrying on. We have the people's work to do, and I believe that Angelo would be a great addition to carrying that people's work forward. So I urge you to reconsider your vote and vote affirmative. Thank you.
Okay, just to be clear, no vote has been taken yet, and I'm just going to be real brief in this. I sit on, the Solid Waste JPA is just that. It's a joint powers authority. It's a separate governmental entity. It is comprised of members, one from the public, and also 2 other governmental entities, the city and the county. I sit on several JPAs, the airport JPA, financial JPAs at the state and regional level, transportation. I have never participated in the JPA for solid waste because I saw it as a political handball, and quite frankly I was involved in it enough that I did not have the time nor the energy to delve into it as much as I did other issues. So for me, it's respecting the process of that governmental entity. Unless something came to me that highlighted an impropriety with that process, I have to respect it. They're the experts, not me on this issue. I'm intrigued by the fact that Supervisor Gitlin did have a tally sheet and also voted for Ms. Glore. I'm going to go ahead and ask for the vote, please.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
No.
Supervisor McClure?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
No.
Chair Finnegan?
Yes. Before we leave this, I'm going to make a comment that I didn't want to pollute the vote with. I was disappointed in some of the comments that I heard here today. They were inappropriate. Thank God I'm big enough not to take a threat by somebody to vote in something that I didn't believe in. And secondly, Mary Wilson, I think, did an admirable job and represented, for me, as a business owner and as a resident personal account, represented both sides fairly and did a great job, and I thank her for her service. Next, we have a 10:45 timed item, which is to waive the full reading, introduce, propose an ordinance to amend Chapter 10.04.04 of the Delaware County Ordinance relating to speed limits on Inyo and Small from Washington. It was requested by the county engineer. Mr. Lawrence.
Well, as you probably all know, the state regulates speed limits, and they have certain laws that you go through. We've done that on this section of Inyo and found that the speed limit should be changed to 35, and so that's my recommendation.
Can I get a motion on that, please?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Public comment on this item. This was one of those, be careful what you ask for. Yeah. It actually raised the speed limit. Back to the board. Poll the vote, please.
Supervisor McClure?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Finnegan?
Yes. And as it is with all agendas, there are highs and lows, and now we come to a point in the agenda that is definitely a high, to be with community participation and service. And that's item number 23, which is to approve and adopt a proclamation honoring the firefighters, dispatch first responders, nurses, doctors, EMTs, and paramedics that serve our community. We're going to acknowledge Mr. Sandler, and we're also going to get a presentation. But before we do, I would like to get a motion on approving the proclamation.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Public comment. Back to the board. Comments. Poll the vote, please.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor McClure?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Finnegan?
Yes, and as a way to start this discussion, I would ask Supervisor Howard to please read that proclamation.
With pleasure. Proclamation of the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors, State of California, designating the week of May 15th through 21st, 2015 as Emergency Medical Services. Whereas every day of the year, all hours of the day and night, we rely on emergency medical services, professionals and volunteers for critical care in our homes, on our roads, and wherever needs exist. And whereas EMS services all Del Norte County residents and visitors, standing ready to respond at a moment's notice and tirelessly enhancing our county's preparedness and reliance. We celebrate their selflessness and courageous contributions to our community. And whereas our EMS system includes a wide array of dedicated specialists, including emergency medical technicians, 911 dispatchers, paramedics, firefighters, law enforcement officials, ambulance service, educators, first responders, nurses, and physicians. EMS teams provide access to quality care when unforeseen illness, injury, or disaster strikes. The aid they administer is provided without regard to race, religion, creed, economic background, or ethnic origin. And whereas EMS providers spend long hours to further their education, train themselves on the latest life-saving techniques, and maintain vital emergency equipment, often choosing to do so on their own time and their own expense. These heroic professionals, volunteers, and citizens form a network that has long supported our health care system, and their example is an inspiration to us all. Therefore, be it proclaimed, the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors hereby honors these heroes by naming the week of May 15th through 21st as Emergency Medical Services Month in Del Norte County.
Chairman Finnegan and members of the board, I'm John Pritchett, General Manager of Del Norte Ambulance, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to update you on Del Norte Ambulance and also the state of EMS in our community. We believe that communication between the various EMS agencies remains open and professional, perhaps more so than ever in recent history. Over the past year, we've seen multiple agencies come together to discuss diverse subjects such as the use of helicopters in the field, mutual aid responses, training, and changes in medical protocols and procedures. A week from today, local, state, and federal agencies will come together at the Del Norte Fairgrounds. Much of the focus of the day will be on learning what equipment, supplies, and resources each agency can bring to emergency situations. After 5 p.m., the public will be invited to view the ground and air equipment that will be on display. We would also like to acknowledge Sutter Coast Hospital, especially its emergency department, which over the past year has truly become a partner in Del Norte County's overall EMS system. Simply put, your EMS system in our community is working and working well. Now, like any multi-agency concern, there are points of disagreements that do arise from time to time. However, your EMS community is made up of reasonable people who have shown a willingness to listen and to work together for the common good. Now, for the past 12 months, it's been a year of achievement for Del Norte Ambulance. In that time, we have instituted several programs to make our service even better for the residents and the visitors to our community. Something we started in 2013 and something we've expanded this past year is our quality improvement programs. First, the paperwork from every call is examined by Rita Nichols, the well-respected former Sutter Coast Hospital emergency room nurse and trauma coordinator. She and Operation Manager Charles Tweed meet weekly to examine various calls, policies, and procedures. From those meetings, we've established directed training for improved care in the field. At the same time, veteran paramedic Chris Hunt submits a quarterly report to North Coast EMS, which then sends information to the state of California for review. Another aspect of our company that has expanded is our training program. As you may well know, both EMT1s and paramedics need 70-plus hours of medical training each 2 years in order to maintain their certificates plus other mandated state and federal requirements. That can be difficult in rural communities such as ours. However, 2 of our paramedics, Tom Phillips and Chris Voorhees, have established in-house training programs that make it easier for our employees to stay in compliance and to keep seldom used skills sharp. We are offering these trainings to others in the local EMS community and at no cost. Other Del Norte Ambulance improvements include the addition of drive cams to our units. These camera devices, along with our long-standing program of road safety, help us make sure our drivers are efficient and, most importantly, driving safely. All of our units have increased its security of our narcotics through the use of a NARCS box, which require our paramedics to use a recorded code to access drugs. We continue to expand the use of evidence-based procedures. Now, research is showing that what was considered a best practice just a few years ago is not always the best course of action in the field. We will continue to work with industry leaders to bring to our community the best available service possible. Last month, I accompanied paramedic Tom Phillips to Washington, D.C., where he was awarded with the prestigious American Ambulance Association Star of Life honor, one of just 87 granted nationwide this year. Along with his work as training officer, Tom has been instrumental in starting and growing the Del Norte Ambulance Explorer program, which now features more than a dozen young people doing good things in our community and in some cases preparing for a career in the medical field. I would like to introduce Tom to the board and those gathered here. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2015 American Ambulance Association Star of Life, Mr. Tom Phillips. While we were in Washington, D.C., the U.S. Senate approved a 3-year extension of the rural and super rural Medicare modifiers. Del Norte County is considered super rural. Without this, small rural ambulance companies would face serious economic consequences. Now, this board has always supported the ambulance industry's efforts in this matter, and that support is greatly appreciated. We are also very pleased to announce that for the 4th consecutive year, Del Norte Ambulance will not be coming to the board to ask for a rate increase in 2015. Last but not least, on May 1st of this year, it marked the 30th anniversary of Ron Sandler purchasing Del Norte Ambulance. In that time, of course, Ron has been an active part of the community, not only as his role as a paramedic and as a business owner, but as a community leader, offering his talents to a wide range of groups, organizations, and projects. I speak on behalf of everyone at Del Norte Ambulance in saying we are proud of our company and we are proud to work for a man of the quality of Ron Sandler. And with that, it is my honor to introduce to you the owner of Del Norte Ambulance, now for more than 3 decades. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the board, the president of Del Norte Ambulance, paramedic Ron Sandler.
Well, after that, I don't have much to say. Wow. The first for everything, huh?
No, you have to look at the picture.
Oh, well, that's 30 years ago, as a nervous young man of 23, I came before this board with a vision to provide the highest level of ambulance service and care possible for our community. Since then, some things have changed. As you can see in the photo, I have some gray and glasses and so forth. What hasn't changed is my commitment to provide the best service possible for our community. 30 years ago, Del Norte Ambulance had 3 used ambulances of various age and condition, 1 on duty, 1 on standby, and 1 in reserve. It was, we worked out of 1 station, we had 1 basic cardiac monitor, and we provided limited advanced life support care. Since then, our service and our community has seen good times, hard times, times of growth, and times of struggle. But no matter what, we stayed together and provided the best service for our community. Today, I'm happy to report that we have 3 ambulances on duty, 24 hours a day, working out of 2 stations with 3 backup ambulances. At the ready, all state-of-the-art equipment. Each ambulance is equipped with a highly sophisticated EKG unit and staffed with well-trained, dedicated EMT and paramedic professionals. We continue to have at the ready a mass casualty response equipment in the event of a major disaster to our community. We have a robust in-house training system that ensures that our paramedics and EMTs are providing the most up-to-date, evidence-based care possible. Del Norte has and will continue to push the EMS envelope to provide the latest technology, services, and care to the residents and visitors of our community that need our service. Our philosophy is to ensure that only the highest qualified men and women join our team. That is important because if our family members need an ambulance, these are the people that will be responding to them. So when I say I put my life and my family's life in their hands, it's not just a statement, it's a fact. Again, I want to thank you for putting your trust in me and the service we provide our community. My pledge 30 years ago stands as strong today as it did then. Del Norte Ambulance is dedicated to serving our community with the highest level of care possible. I thank you, and I would urge any of you to come right along with these men and women and see what they do on a daily basis.
Thank you. Ron, on behalf of the board and on behalf of the community, thank you for your service and providing us with a safer, much safer, healthier community. Thank you.
I want to say thank you also and let you know that having sat so long on the EMS board, Del Norte Ambulance is never one of the troubleshooters. You know, they'll have some stuff that's happening in Humboldt County with the ERs and the ambulances, and they're just kind of pushing back and forth with each other. And every time Del Norte comes up, it's working very well, and they're going above and beyond, so thank you.
Which is going to take us, we're going to jump around here and go to item number 25. We're going to receive a presentation by the Chief Probation Officer, support development of ethical standards of conduct requested by Chief Probation. And just okay, we'll tell you what, we're going to take a 5-minute potty break. Before we do, something occurred to me. This litmus test, such and such a thing you were talking about over there. Maybe the Solid Waste Board wants to consider that other position to be an elected position, which is the litmus test I live up to every day. So something to consider later on. We're going to take a 5-minute break. recommendation by the Chief Probation Officer. Support the development of ethical standards of conduct as requested by the Chief Probation Officer. Lonnie.
Thank you, Board. I appreciate the time. I have some brief prepared statement, but before I do, I'll start off with a anecdotal illustration, I guess. I've got 3 little boys. My oldest is 5.5. All of them are within a span of 3.5 years. So my unfortunate circumstance, I'll end up with all 4 boys in high school at one time. As part of that, they're all going, they're all going to learn to drive about the same time too. And most everyone here, I'm sure, are drivers themselves. I've lived in places where driving on a roadway is somewhat taking your life in your own hands. They don't believe in signs or markings or anything else as you drive along the roadway. And I am looking forward to having those things to help my boys learn how to drive. I look at the implementation of a policy very similarly to that. I have the distinction of being the head of a law enforcement agency in this county who has great resource in its employees. I have great employees. I oversee probation, bar, and juvenile hall. Each one has its own unique challenges, and each one of them has employees working there who love their jobs and dedicate a lot of themselves to those jobs. My responsibility as the head of this agency is to give them that direction, give them those guidelines as they go down the road in performance of their duties. So I'd like to start off with that, and my prepared statement, I've got some numbers that's going to kind of guide this. 1998 is the first. When former Chief Probation Officer Ralph Alsop was planning to retire, the county commissioned a management audit to be conducted by Susie Cohen and Associates. One of the first findings of that audit was the critical need to establish and implement a policy to guide the decisions of officers and employees of the probation department. Cohen and Associates, oh, I'm sorry. I'm horrible at reading through things sometimes. So guide the decisions of the officers and to achieve the outcomes of rehabilitation and accountability for offenders and professionalism for the department. Cohen and Associates put it this way: to protect the staff and administration of the department, to ensure the documentation necessary to defend against liability, to enhance administrative oversight and staff consistency, and to provide an essential basic organizational management tool, the probation department must develop a manual of policies and procedures. The point was made that this, quote unquote, this matter should not be forgotten or put on hold for too long. The liability is too extensive and the need too great. That was 17 years ago and 3 administrations ago. Unfortunately, this advice was not heeded. And over the last 17 years and 3 succeeding administrations, implementation of a policy has been forgotten and put on hold. During this time, the probation department has been fortunate, for the most part, to have the caliber of staff that has allowed us to avoid many of the pitfalls that were identified in 1998. Despite this great fortune, the liability associated with the normal operations of a law enforcement organization cannot be ignored. The probation department is now moving towards the goal of creating a comprehensive departmental policy, and one of the critical pieces, an ethical standard of conduct, is the first to be completed and approved by County Council. This ethical standard of conduct delineates and codifies the standard that officers and employees of the probation department are already held to by our community. It is incumbent upon the department to codify this standard for its employees and the community that we serve. I cannot stress enough the importance of an ethics policy to a law enforcement organization. Many consider it unthinkable that an organization such as ours would even operate without one. It's doubly true for a law enforcement organization such as mine, where we are expected to involve ourselves in the most intimate details of the lives of the offenders that we supervise in order to facilitate their rehabilitation. In many cases, we are entrusted with the authority to legally ignore the constitutional rights of our offenders and walk into their homes without notice, to search and seize their property without a warrant. This responsibility cannot be conscionably carried out without the ironclad assurance of a policy that will support my officers and employees in the performance of their duties. 4.5 pages. This ethics policy, which I have copies of in case the board wants an extra copy. This policy is a derivative of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Correctional Probation Officer Ethical Standards of Conduct. That's a mouthful. Is fundamentally the same as the American Probation and Parole Association Ethics Policy, the California Probation, Parole, and Correctional Association Ethics Policy, and every other law enforcement ethics policy in this state. The principles of limited authority, honesty, trustworthiness, impartiality, and courtesy, among others, are universal to ethical standards of conduct for law enforcement agencies across the state and nation. 57 days. The process to implement this very simple and brief policy has been an ongoing challenge for me. After it was drafted and approved by County Council, I was informed that the normal practice for implementation of a policy such as this was to send it to Human Resources, who would coordinate a review by the union. As of today, the union has requested a 2-hour meeting to meet and confer over a few pieces of paper, and that meeting has yet to occur. It's currently scheduled for May 20th, next week, which is 57 business days after it was submitted to HR on March 3rd. And let me emphasize 57 days, business days, not counting weekends or holidays. While I understand the desire of the union to have input in the policies that affect the people they represent, I am greatly concerned that throughout this year, as I continue the process of writing, reviewing, and revising the hundreds of pages of policy that will guide the probation department for decades to come, I will continue to run into similar stalling tactics and roadblocks. I would ask you as a board to continue to involve yourself in this process and to hold both myself and the union to account for our actions in providing my 50-person staff the protection a policy provides, the defense from liability that it erects, and the tool for consistent and professional service to our community that it creates. Thank you.
Thank you, Lonnie. Questions from board members? Comments, board members?
I just think it's a great direction, Lonnie. That's, I don't know why we don't have it throughout the county, even for our board. It's great to me.
Lonnie, I met with you and obviously very supportive. And I think I told you at that time, as elected officials, we are mandated to pass an ethics class every 4 years. Every 2 years. 2 years. As a realtor, I have to pass one every 4 years. Mm-hmm. Couldn't believe that peace officers didn't have the same level. And so completely supportive and completely frustrated by the tactics, the stalling tactics that seem to be part of the method of operation throughout the state and throughout the country with some of the local unions. This is not, I understand contracts. I've been on the union side, I've been on management side, and I understand the process, and I understand how you can be processed to death sometimes. This, I hope that the unions consider it more of a priority than they have in the past to meet and confer, get this off the books, and get on to some good work. So thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Supervisor Gitlin?
Lonnie, my hat's off to you. This is a champion at work right here. I'm looking at you. The fact that it's long overdue, and this is one of many different aspects of your overall department. You'll have different things to add as you move along. I think what is not being addressed here is how the public is served. If you don't have exemplary employees who will meet minimum thresholds of professionalism, it wasn't really discussed at all in terms of those who are subject to the under your authority. What happens to them when someone who is not qualified or fails to heed to a certain standard? So that needs to be addressed as a primary factor. So anything we can do to assist you in moving this movement forward, moving their code of ethics forward, please let us know, and thank you for your great work.
Thank you.
I just want to say that when I met with you, that I understand the frustration of the 57 days, but at the same time, I think that good government, I told you this, that good government is like a bonsai tree. It takes great care and time. And so I'm hoping that the meeting can happen on the 20th, and I'm hoping that there can be resolution and it moves forward. So I look forward to the discussions that you're going to have with this association and come up, you know, that it'll be a positive outcome. Thank you.
Likewise, thank you.
Yeah. Any member of the public wish to comment on this?
Norma Williams, Chapter President of the Delaware County Employees Association, SEIU 10-1. There was no stalling tactic on the part of the union in order to meet and confer as per our contract and MMBA. As a matter of fact, it was the county administration HR department who first approached the union with the notice that they wanted to have a meeting with probation in order to meet and confer over this policy. The county precipitated this. They started the process. We basically said, fine, we have no problem with that. When do you want to meet? We wanted to have our union rep come up here. We actually were waiting to hear from the HR director. And we waited. And we waited. We sent, myself as well as our union rep, sent emails, which I do have on file, to the HR department wanting to know when we could meet. We suggested several dates. Again, trying to coordinate all of everyone's schedules seemed to be an issue. However, we still then said, okay, fine, we can meet the beginning of May. We waited, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited. And we sent several emails, of which the chief probation officer was part of the email conversation, basically asking, when can we meet? These are the dates that we can meet. Again, we waited. It wasn't until just a couple weeks ago, about a week or so ago, then we finally said, okay, can we meet on this date? Can we meet on this date? Well, today would have been fine, but again, we were told that the chief probation officer wasn't available. I'm going to be out of the area, but then we decided we would meet next week. Our union representative has no problem. I have it penciled in already to meet next week at 2 o'clock on the 20th. So again, there was no stalling tactic on the part of the union, contrary to what you have been told. Again, we waited and waited and waited to hear from county administration, as well as a probation officer, as to when we could meet. The union has always been available to meet. We were just waiting to finally get the scheduled call. Just wanted to clarify it.
Well, I'm glad the waiting is over, and hopefully you'll have a positive resolve to this on the 20th. Thank you. Anybody else? Back to the board. Chris, you wanted to say something?
It's terrible politics enters into something as important as this sometimes. And oftentimes, especially in this day and age when our law enforcement is under such scrutiny, that we could put something like this on a fast track to get it done. I hope what was said today by the various folks that spoke in public and our chief probation officer, I hope we could resolve this issue in a timely fashion, because it is needed and it's long overdue.
Thank you. All right. We're going to go to item number 24. And the board does look forward to being able to take that as an action item in the near future. Lonnie, thank you very much. Item 24 is to review and take action on the proposed budget for the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority as requested by the acting director, program manager for Solid Waste Management Authority. And Ted, I'm assuming that's you.
Thank you, Chair Finnegan. So I've...
For the record.
Well, yes, Ted Ward, Acting Director, Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority. I've handed out to each of you a balanced budget for the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority for fiscal year 15-16. I've made 2 changes to the draft budgets that have been reviewed and passed by the Authority Board and the Crescent City Council, and I'd like to thank Supervisor Hemmingson, as it was his questions that led me to work more closely with Sheriff Cron and Clinton Shadd of the County Auditor's Office to clarify how to budget for major maintenance activities at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. The budget changes are related to the projected expenses to repair the transfer station floor. Unlike the city or the county, JPAs like the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority must fund depreciation. That is to say that depreciation for our agency is a cash expense funded each year. The proposed budget pays $98,000, for example, for depreciation in fiscal year 15-16. After discussions with Sheriff, myself, Authority Treasurer Rich Taylor, and Clinton Shadd, we concluded that it would be best not to include these maintenance expenses in the budget so that we can assess these expenses in light of the available fund balance after the close of this fiscal year. The Authority's available fund balance has fluctuated over the years and is generally increasing at this point. Still, we felt it would be most prudent to complete the fiscal year before we planned on this major expense for the coming fiscal year. So that changed the amounts in items lines 20180 and 30490, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
So
the 2 lines that changed were 20180, which is for maintenance structures and improvements at transfer station maintenance, and 30490, which was the amount for depreciation. The previous version of the budget essentially pulled money out of depreciation, and we would do that differently moving forward. But as I said, that expense and the revenue associated with it have both been pulled out.
So, Ted, is this revised budget, has this been approved by the board and the city?
It will be presented back to the board. But in terms of substance, it's really not a significant change. The only difference being this one significant maintenance activity has been pulled out. But apart from that, all other elements of the budget have remained unchanged.
Well, then I've got a couple of issues then with payroll and part-time temporary that we talked about. You've made some changes, and I'm just wondering why you didn't make more changes. I can understand you funding all the positions that that are allowable, but then you've also increased the part-time temporary, and it occurs to me that if you fund all those positions, that the need for part-time temporary should go back to the amount that you used in the previous year. Go ahead.
I appreciate that comment. As you are maybe aware, the last couple of years we have been shorthanded, and so that has increased the part-time temporary, and so that was merely based on previous year's expenses. And it was not, we did not adjust the payroll numbers down in that those numbers among other numbers are provided by the county's auditor's office. So I just take the numbers provided by the auditor's office and for those line items, plunk them in.
I understand that, but it seems like you would make an allowance either one way or the other, either reduce your payroll or reduce your part-time temporary. That's just my suggestion. I'm just saying these are the things that stick out at me. The other problem that stuck out at me was the employee benefits, which you had in a revised employee benefits for 14-15 of $107,399. My understanding is that's way more than what you need to have in there. So at some point you made a revised budget transfer to get it to that amount, and I don't understand why that happened, because that made me look at the benefits that you had for this year, thinking with the payroll being more that they should be more. After talking to Clinton Shadd, I know how to calculate that now. So I don't have an issue with the amount that you proposed for this year, but I do have a problem with your revised budget transfer that happened in 14-15, and why that would have happened, if that's put in the wrong place, if it needed to be put someplace else, if it's just a mistake. But my understanding is that in employee benefits so far this year, you're in the $76,000 range, not anywhere close to $107,000. So, and I'm going to go right on down the list. Workers' comp, now you have a revised amount. They do have the amount for that now. So if you're changing numbers, I don't know why you don't get the revised numbers that are there for you now. My understanding is workers' comp is going to be $37,300. But you're leaving it at $26,890.
We were forced to draft our budget well ahead of most other county agencies, and so we draft our budget using the best preliminary numbers that we have from the auditor's office, and those do get revised over time. I
understand that, but you had the opportunity. You revised the budget now, and why you didn't revise that number bothers me just a little bit. The maintenance and structures, so you've decided now that you don't need to have that money? I mean, that's... We
do. It's an important repair and maintenance activity that really should happen in the coming fiscal year, but the decision among the Sherrick, Clinton Shad, Treasurer Rich Taylor, and myself was that it would be best to finish the fiscal year, assess where our available fund balance was, and look at that before we plan on this major expense. But your board approved that money. I mean, if you're going by what your board approved and wanted you to do, they wanted you to put this money in the budget. Is what it's fairly clear to me that they approved this without questioning anything that's in there, and now you just took it out. Well, so I'm disappointed in that, and in that you have the authority to just put in or take out whatever you want after the board's already approved the budget and the amount. So that concerns me a little bit. To be clear, it's not what I want, it's what I would recommend that happen in terms of the maintenance of the transfer station facility. And the issue really was about how to indicate that on the budget, because as was clarified by Sheriff Cron, were we to include this budget, that expense in this budget, he said the appropriate way to do that would actually be that this would be a deficit budget for this fiscal year. Not that we're planning on digging ourselves into a hole, but that our maintenance expenses for that year would exceed the amount that we would pay into depreciation. But, go ahead. So it brought to bear the discussion on what was the amount in the available fund balance, and we all felt it would be most prudent to wait until the close of the fiscal year so we could make a final assessment. As we've discussed many times at the Solid Waste Authority board level, the operations like the Solid Waste Authority work best accounted on an accrual basis, and the county's accounting is on a modified cash basis. So it really is the close of the fiscal year when we all have a good picture on where our financial health is. Well, you know, the budget is a projection, and you're supposed to put in the budget what you project to spend. And you're projecting to spend that $178,000 roughly, I'm rounding up. You're expecting to spend that money, and your board approved to spend that money, and then you have taken it out of the budget. I don't have another process than that which is dictated by our bylaws, and this is the process I'm following. Okay.
Can I just give a point of clarification?
I'm not done yet.
It was just a point of clarification on the process of the adopting of the budget. That when the budget comes, it comes first to the Solid Waste Board, and then it is to be vetted by both the city and the county, and then it goes back with those changes and recommendations, and then the final budget is voted on.
Supervisor Hemmingson.
Yeah, and I think that's the process that it should be, but you would think that there should have been some questions. Now, I don't know which budget we're commenting on, whether it's this revised budget. I really haven't had time to go through it, although the glaring thing that came out to me was the depreciation expense, which we've talked about. Now, depreciation is a calculated number that is predetermined when you get into the budget. That's not something that you change. That is a number. That is a calculated number. That comes from your depreciation schedule on how those assets are depreciated out. And yet you took this money out of that depreciation line and made it a negative number, and that can't work. I mean, it just can't work. And so
it was corrected based on your questions, which I appreciate.
Right. And so I think that's fixed now, but you know, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, because this is the reason that I think somebody with a business background, or at least a financial background, needs to be on that board to take a look at these things, especially when you know, the current board doesn't seem to want to ask any questions of what I think are glaring errors and you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Those are my comments. And this is not something that we can approve, I don't think, until it comes from the board, from your board. Because we don't have an approved budget from your board other than the one that you submitted. And if you're submitting the one, that we got before you gave us this new one, then I would have to reject it and make written comments on how to fix it more to like what you've got in this budget here. So it's not something that I can approve.
Ted, I'm not going to go over the excellent report from Supervisor Hemmingson, other than we must have been working in parallel universes, because I too met with Auditor Shad yesterday, and I'm asking the same questions. And I'm not going to beat this dead horse other than to say that I was clearly told, and I see you corrected it as of today, you cannot take money from an expense and depreciate it. Now, wherever that advice came from that you could do that, maybe that's where we need to look at the clarification. Because you as the acting director, you may not have the expertise to read this, and I'm reading it with my glasses on, and I'm looking, what does this mean? And then, thank you, Auditor Shad, for pointing out that you cannot depreciate an expense. I know about the flooring, so that's explainable and that's clear. I had another question, which Supervisor Hammond didn't bring up, about the significant increase in professional services from $15,000 up to almost $25,000.
As I've discussed at the authority board level, we have a number of engineering activities that will be coming in the coming year, primarily the activities associated with the appeal for the waste discharge requirements fee. As has been discussed at the authority board level, we have a 1A threat and complexity rating, which precipitates an over $70,000 annual fee from the State Water Resources Board.
I understand that, but perhaps when you're coming before our board, the presentation of a collateral report associated with some of these expenses and the justification thereof.
Well, in the staff report that's in your board packet, if you look on the second page, under significant expenses on page 2 at the bottom, it says significant budget changes are associated with landfill obligations. Water quality monitoring expenses are expected to decrease compared to fiscal year. Staff also anticipate additional engineering expenses associated with this agency's continuing appeal.
Mr. Ward, I understand. I read that. This is more for the public. This is for public transparency. Because most people here in this audience or watching on television don't look at this. And they don't read these reports. They have to do a search on it. So it's up to us to communicate that to them. It's up to you to communicate that to us and underscore it. Let us know exactly what's going on. That's one of the reasons I pull many items off of consent agenda. So the public is aware of what is going on with their money. Now, I think that in future when you present this, and I have not had a chance to read this over, and I see you've made some changes.
I've made 2 changes, and I've discussed both of those.
Yes, and I appreciate that. And we'll look at this thing over, and when we see you back next time, we'll have an opportunity to look over and have some questions with regard to that. So I appreciate the Auditor Controller assisting us, myself, in identifying what can and cannot be depreciated and other questions relative to this authority budget report. Thank you.
So how much is your budget, Ted?
This is a balanced budget. It's not the same as a profit and loss, and I don't have that immediately in front of me.
Well, that was going to go straight to my question before I have this sidebar that's been continuous over here be made public. This is the most confusing budget I've ever seen. It it should break out revenue and expenditures, and there should be a way to follow it a hell of a lot more closely, or a heck of a lot more closely. I apologize. And you can't. And to say that this is the process, I know budgets, and I'm going to take a 3-minute recess, and I'm going to let you gain composure of your facial expressions. Okay?
All right.
You know, I've got to reflect Chair Finnegan's comments. I mean, I've dealt with $100 million plus budgets in my life, and I cannot interpret this. And I would really hope that next time this board has the opportunity to review this budget, that it's put in a format that we could more readily pull out the expense and, more importantly, the profit side of this, whether it's a transfer station or not, and more importantly, see some bottom line figures here, see the balance sheet, see the P&Ls, but more importantly, let's take a look at that past history. I'm seeing some revised and approved 15-14. I'm seeing some 15-16 projections. I'd love to see what your 13-14 looked like also. So if we could have that pulled forward next time we have this or take this in consideration, I'd really appreciate it. But it's very difficult to read this, having seen it for the first time.
I appreciate that it's difficult to read, and I will endeavor to restructure our budget so that in future presentations it more closely mirrors what you're used to seeing from the county.
And it doesn't even have to be from the county. There's lots of different budgets, that, even business budgets that you can rely on that don't mirror this. Bad check reimbursement fees, you have it down for $100. Is there any place in this budget that takes into account that $33,000 you guys lost? 25,000, whatever it was, 19,000, 29, whatever.
It's not addressed on an annual budget. It's not, there isn't a separate line item for that.
Should there not be a carryover to show that debt, or has it been forgiven?
Like I said, when we look at income and expenses and fund balances, that's a separate report than the budget.
Okay, and I guess that's my point. It should be in the budget. Expenses and revenues is tied directly to the budget and is the boilerplate that you get to reference.
I did have one question, Ted, on your on the revenue side of the budget. Code enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Is that normally something you get revenue from code enforcement?
There is the potential for gaining revenue for code enforcement activities where there are liens placed, and then there are revenues that are then paid in a different fiscal year than where those expenses were incurred.
So, and I didn't see it, if it's in here, that there was a expense for code enforcement. And I might have just missed it, but I did not pick it up.
That would be covered under the professional services with the city and the county. I did meet with Dave Mason and Heidi Kunstall to discuss funding of code enforcement, and we came to an understanding.
That was going to be my next question. Thank you.
Okay. There's some options here, as you know, through the Joint Powers Authority. This is presented to us. We don't get to approve it or disapprove of it. It is what it is. We can either by action or by consensus give direction based on your comments we heard today to our members on that JPA to have it brought up and put on the agenda as how to address these issues that we find confusing at best. How would you like to proceed?
Well, my understanding is that previously, and I don't remember if we made a difference, previously we had to make written comments. So if that's the case, then I think we should make written comments. But I'm not so sure that we didn't change the budget process to be approved by the county and the city. Is that something that happened?
There are a few options available to the Board of Supervisors. You could take no action, and that would essentially be the same as approving the budget. If there are specific comments, and there are written comments, and those are adopted by the entire board, then of course those can be forwarded. And if there's any specific written objection to the budget, then the bylaws do indicate that the supervisor should designate a representative to be present at the authority meeting on May 19th to present those objections. So those are three different options.
Cool. Thank you.
What's your pleasure? I would ask perhaps the board through the CAO meet with Clint and make sure that what you heard here today is presented to the Solid Waste Management Authority at their meeting. And I would like to see, as part of a staff report, the implications of the budget. Number one, I would like to know what the revenues are, and I would like to know what the expenses are. Saying it's balanced, you know, if Jay came to us and told us that we had a balanced budget without telling us it was 52 million or 87 million, he wouldn't be around very long.
It's approximately a $3 million budget, sir.
And it'd be nice to see where those revenues come from. Because what is lacking in this budget is a projection in the staff report of what you see in the future. And I'm not just talking about 15, 16, 16, 17, but with more recycling, declining tipping fees, et cetera, where are the trends that go with this budget? So there's a lot missing for me, other than just rearranging the numbers. So I hope that all that can be incorporated into remarks back to the solid waste budget, or Solid Waste Management Authority. Anything else to be included in that?
I will try to carry the message, but I'm not clear exactly what the message is, other than the format is confusing and we would like to possibly adopt the format, but when I went up and got our budget, it's very similar to our format. So but I think that there's a bit of confusion in relationship to a profit and loss statement in relationship to a preliminary budget. So possibly we can, I will carry back to the board the request by this board to try to put it into a better format for reading and hopefully resubmit that to this board, probably not for approval, but for you to peruse and see if that's what you're looking for. And then also, I think that possibly next time we need to have the profit and loss statement along with the work plan, because there is a work plan that mimics a strategic plan. Because of the last 2 years, there hasn't been any movement in writing a strategic plan for the 2, 5, and 10. But hopefully that's on my agenda for the solid waste to start doing that. But there is a work plan, and then there can be the profit and loss statement. I think that might be helpful for this board to see what, and the balance sheet. But is that what I'm taking back?
No, not for me anyway.
Okay, tell me what I'm taking back.
If you would be paying attention to what were the questions we're asking instead of your sidebars with Supervisor Howard, then maybe you could have listened to some of the things that we were talking about.
What's that part about ethics and decorum and treating people properly?
We don't have enough time to do another 3-minute break here. But my suggestion is that there were some comments on this side. I'm just saying, Supervisor Gitlin,
Can I just make this one point? Your board approved to spend $177,000 on a new floor.
Correct.
Your director just took it out of your budget.
but it's going to be back in the budget at the close of the fiscal year to make sure that there's then that 2 years of depreciation. Is that right, Clint?
If you're projecting it now, it should be in the budget now.
It's
You've
gonna-
approved that, and now you're trying to make excuses.
There
on
would, I think that our auditor suggested that it be withdrawn, and that in the new fiscal year, because we do need a floor. That's a given. And then they suggested that it would be put back in after the end of this fiscal year. Is that correct? Can I ask the auditor if that's correct, or what happened?
Clinton Shad, Donut County Auditor Controller. So to answer your question, what we discussed was you can't take money out of a depreciation line. That's an expense that happens per your schedule. And we all know that the fund balance for solid waste is getting better, but definitely in a hole as it was set up. So when we looked through the numbers this morning, we tried to calculate out the fund balance less the post-closure liability, because that's the big automatic transfer that happened when it was started, to see the direction of solid waste, and they are coming in the black more and more. Our discussion revolved around, let's look at this year, close this year out. If you're in the black, see how far into the black you are, how much funds you do have. If you have enough funds available in your fund balance at year end, then go ahead and put that full expense back in. If not, then try to revisit it with a different plan or maybe a different mechanism. Because we also know that staffing levels have been short at solid waste, and there's no reason to say budget for a position 12 months out of the year if it's only going to be filled 10 months out of the year, which would free up some monies available to possibly also cover that project. But it's really early. We don't want that there right now because the numbers aren't there to support that project, but they could be. We don't know what year-end looks like. We don't know what the staffing levels look like. So my thought with Mr. Ward was, let's pull it out, get us an operating budget with appropriation limits, spending authority to keep the transfer station moving, close the year out, take a look at it, and then revisit that expense versus what your income levels are. So it may, I'm not guaranteeing it's going to be in, I'm not saying it's not going to be out, but we don't have a clear enough picture, in May to look at June 30th to then turn around and spend $200,000 next year. Does that answer everybody's question?
Yes, it does.
It certainly answers the question. It doesn't answer the process.
Okay, so I'm going to, Supervisor McClure is on the Solid Waste Board, and she's going to bring on her perspective. In fairness to this board, that may have questions that might be not as adequately represented, I would also ask Clinton Shad to participate in the process through the CAO, Mr. Serena, in conjunction with Supervisor Hemmingson, who has some very intelligent, pointing, specific questions regarding this budget, to make sure that everything is represented at the next presentation. And Supervisor Gitlin, you're on that board. Hopefully you'll pay attention to make sure that that happens too.
Indeed, Chair. This is not about whether we need a floor or not. This is a roadmap of where we are going. Indeed, it's unreadable. But more importantly, when we point out that there are roads here that go nowhere, and we're changing our roadmap, it's going to take us longer to get there. So perhaps when we have these expenses, they're projected in this budget and reflect so accordingly. So I am underscoring the very important and intelligent questions posed by Supervisor Hemmingson in having this tool being used appropriately and correctly. So I thank you for that, sir.
And this will be...
I'm going to wait to hear and see where the direction of this goes. Absolutely.
So the direction's already been given. It'll come back to us. All right, next, 26. Public comment. Sorry. Yes, please.
Elizabeth Henry, county resident. I hope you realize as you're having this discussion that you have one individual doing two jobs, the director and the program manager. That's not...
We don't.
Okay, but that does affect what happens and how things are done. And I think that it would help to have a full personnel, to have staff there that can make the changes you would like. I agree with you. I have a hard time reading that budget too, and I've read a lot of budgets when I was a member of the Board of Supervisors. So, but I think that having a full staff there, which there wasn't and hasn't been, not just the director, but other people, so it's been really difficult. And I think Mr. Howard asked an interesting question about 2013-14, and here again, the problem of not having a director shows up. The budget was overspent in that year, fiscal year, because there was backfilling for the director. The treasurer worked more and had to be paid. Legal counsel worked more and had to be paid. So there was a lot of expenses for professional services that were not in the budget. Also that year, there was the R3 report, and then there was the payment to Kevin when he left. So there have been major expenses, and I don't think it's been made clear to you, and it should be. There have been major expenses to backfill that position that's been empty now for almost 2 years. So I think that's really important to give direction to your representatives. Do something about it, because I think that will help the process and it will help work move along, because you can't expect one person to do both the program, which is the landfill, the water monitoring and all that, and then also supervise the kind of the business aspect, the budgeting and all that. That's all laid on one person. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. Any final comments? All right. This will be coming back to us. Word of caution, every time somebody brings up staffing and that there's not enough expertise and that there's too much work, the first thing that comes to my mind is then bring it back in-house, give it to one of our departments, and let us share some of the work. It can be done a lot more efficiently, effectively, and cost-effective. So careful what you ask for. No, that's not a motion at this time. I'm not on your board. All right. With that, number 26 is direct community development to work with the county council to develop a financing plan for the costs associated with connecting to the community services area number 1 as requested by the community development director. This has been out there for years.
Yes, I think we're...
Or the problem has.
Yes,
now,
it has. I think that we're moving in a positive direction. For those of you who are not aware, the West Park Properties is a mobile home park that's located within the county's urban boundary. It is not served by public sewer, but has public sewer very close to it, in close proximity. They've had some issues with a failing sewer system that have been fairly well documented in our local newspaper recently, and the California Department of Housing and Community Development issued them an order to abate, to clean up, to get it going. The fact is the on-site sewage disposal system on the property is likely unable to be repaired or to be replaced due to limited area at that location. Therefore, connection to the public sewer is their best option. The property owners are working with the California Department of Housing and Community Development to get an extension on this request to clean up. They're working currently with the City of Crescent City to identify a financing plan that will allow them to, amortize their payments for the hookups over an extended period of time. The county does not have a similar financing package, and the daughter of the owner, Jemmy Westbrook, has sent a letter to the Board of Supervisors acting in their role as directors of the county service area to potentially consider us putting together a similar financing plan. And so my request to you today as the manager of the county service area is to direct us staff to work with county council to put something together to offer a similar package to what the city has put forward.
Heidi, what is the status of the Water Quality Board on this pending matter?
They're in a holding pattern at this point.
Time frame involved? Are they?
No, they're essentially coordinating with our office. If at this point what we're seeing is progress toward actually getting them connected, which is what I think all of us would like to see. So at this point, they are holding off on any type of formal action to see how this plays out, which I think is a fair thing to do.
And I think it's just, if we can legally find a way to help finance, we need to get this project going. That lift station has been sitting out there idle now for what, 3 years, 4 years?
Yeah.
And it's low-income housing. They need a place. We need to help them out. So if there's any way that we can get that done legally, I'm all in favor of it.
As am I.
Public comment? Back to the board. Heidi, thank you very much for your diligence in trying to find a solution to this. It's been a problem, nothing new to add. Direction of the board by consensus is to please proceed. Which brings us to item 27. There's a policy that, Jay, I'm going to let you talk about.
Well, before the board today is a policy that, and I'll preface all of this with, it is not a statement for or against the legalization of recreational marijuana. It is in anticipation of initiatives that are more than potential for 2016 to legalize recreational marijuana in California. The anticipation is there will be multiple initiatives that over the next year or so will be competing. Through the North Coast counties, in this case, Humboldt, Del Norte, Lake, Mendocino, Sonoma, and Trinity, the CAOs in those counties, along with the staff in many of the southern counties that have a lot of staff, Sonoma and Mendocino primarily took the lead on this, felt that there was a need to get out in front of this potential initiative and be very clear to the state of California what is important to the northern counties. Some of our counties are some of the primary growing areas in the state of California, in the United States. There's a lot of effect currently by illegal growing of marijuana. The most probably egregious has been on the environmental side in Mendocino County and Trinity County. There's a lot of effects of that also on the public safety side. So there was a summit held about 2 months ago, and Supervisor Hemmingson and I attended for about half of that summit because it was in Santa Rosa, which was not necessarily centralized to all the counties, but it was held down in Santa Rosa, and we met. One of the primary concerns that we carried with us was the ability to regulate locally and regulate in such a way that it is something that could be effective for our community, not just all the communities. So each community would have the ability to take in any type of public comment and concerns and then tailor it to their county. The main issues that came out of that summit are listed in the policy, and I'll go over the primaries, which are local control, revenue and taxation, environmental protection, economics. And under the local control is health, safety, and welfare of constituents, which is part of what we took to the table regarding regulation for underage users and how we would be able to deal with those effectively. This took about 60 days to go through the policy vetting. There were numerous phone calls, numerous comments, and from that was a consolidated policy that all of the counties felt they could get out in front of the issue, and in fact, my understanding now is there's numerous counties that want to join in on this policy. Ultimately, the larger counties down south of us will enter into this discussion, and the politics of the initiatives will be vetted and a lot of debate. But at this point, all of the counties have come to at least an agreement that this policy covers the primary issues that are important to the North Coast. From that, the request was to bring it back to the individual boards for adoption. The original discussion was if there were any concerns, they could be vetted and possibly included. At this point, it's basically an all or nothing. It's so far into the process with some of these counties that it's been approved in Humboldt. I believe it's been approved in Mendocino. Del Norte, Lake, and Trinity will be the next three. So the request before you today would be to adopt this policy and then forward on as appropriate, which is in the recommendation to CSAC and RCRC. The summit included both of those groups. It included Assemblyman Wood. Everybody has been involved in this process, including supervisors from all of the counties. If there are any concerns with the policy, we can certainly bring those up. The issues at hand right now are primarily to give as much information to our legislators before these initiatives start coming together and we see what those are. So they have some guidance as we go into it, along with this as being part of our ledge platform, which RCRC and CSAC can then carry also.
Supervisor Hemmingson, you participated in this.
Yeah, I did, and I'm glad that Jay said that. It's not that we're advocating for or against the use of cannabis. This is going to be something that the rural counties feel like is going to happen, and it's not going to be voted in or out by the northern counties or by the counties that are in this group. And we just felt like we needed some sort of policy or process that that will protect us, that we don't end up with mandates that we can't afford, that the environmental concerns are addressed, and as Jay said, the use of younger kids, that we address that. That all these things that are in this policy, I think it was well thought out, and I think when or if it comes about, I think we'll be ready for it if we get to keep what's in there.
Good. Anybody else on the board? Public comment?
I just want to clarify that I didn't get the actual policy on my, it's not included in the report.
Jay, can I ask a question?
It's not there, so I couldn't read it.
A question with regard to, I realize this is an economics, an economics decision we're going to make today. Is there anything in this discussion about an opt-out clause for individual counties like they have in Colorado, for instance, on this similar measure? Was that discussed?
We aren't at that level of detail at this point. The initiatives have not even come forward. The anticipation is they will have potentially 3 initiatives, one that is more conservative, more of a law enforcement type of a background, one that is more open, meaning just legalize it, and then there will be what's negotiated. So opt-out, this is basically a policy. We can come forward with any additional policies and any other comments on initiatives through our legislative process at any given time. So this is committing the county to being proactive along with those other counties. You know, opting out is subjective to the board's decisions based on what we see come forward that's tangible. Right now, there's nothing tangible. We just think it's going to happen, and it's pretty certain.
Anybody else on the board? No? Public comment?
Steve Perez, on county here. I am curious as to what this policy statement is, and it's not on the website. The letter introducing this topic to you is on the website, but the actual policy is not. And not that I really like delays, because I think this is an important document that needs to go forward. I really believe that very strongly. Having worked with the state, I know how important it is to get your issues before them, especially in the formulative process. But my God, I mean, this could turn into be something really interesting, to say the least, and especially when it was, the policy itself was not made available to the public. May want to slow down a little bit.
Okay. Any other public comment? Okay, back to the board. I'd have to concur that until the policy is here, we really shouldn't give direction, so we could read it. I didn't participate in those. I am very familiar with the policies that have been developed over the last several years with both CSAC and RCRC, as well as I think some of us heard the presentations, the lessons learned from Colorado and Washington. It is not necessarily an economic issue. Could be socioeconomic, definitely health related. So let's bring it back on our next agenda with the policy.
Yeah, I certainly apologize because it was intended to be in there, obviously. Just for the public's sake, there is a preamble. There are the policy topics that I spoke about: local control, revenue, taxation, environmental protection, economics, and the conclusion is that North Coast counties support a comprehensive state regulatory framework that explicitly preserves existing local control while protecting the environment, local economies, and quality of life. We welcome the opportunity to provide additional language and information that supports these policies and concepts. We will certainly re-agendize this so that it's out there. The package.
When I caught it, I got busy doing something else and didn't.
Yeah, the package included my report, the policy report, as well as the policy itself. Okay. So I will get it back on.
I thought maybe it was on the iPads. It wasn't in my printed thing, so it doesn't highlight, because like I say, the thing that we had been fighting over at the state level for the last several years has been local control and local input, and that was in there in one of the highlights.
And that certainly is the focus, but we'll get this back on there and make sure that it's up there.
All right, moving right along. Let's get to item number 28, which is to approve and authorize the chair to sign the Delaware County Department of Health and Human Services and Delaware County Probation Department's Integrated California Outcome and Accountability System and the Office of Child Abuse Prevention System Improvement Plan for the period from November 30th, 14 to November 30th, 2019, which is a 5-year plan. And Barbara, I'm going to invite you to come up and talk about it. The good news is when things like this happen at the end of an agenda, sometimes the lengthy report is not called for. However, this is one of those items that we could spend 2 hours on. It most definitely has to do with the relationship we have with our children and families and issues, and when we're planning for 5 years, it's a big deal.
Yes, so it's a 5-year plan, as you know. We have submitted a draft to the state. They have sent it back for comments, and then we do an annual update. So we have the opportunity as we move forward with the Children's Bill of Rights and the Safe and Healthy Families, and our change within the department to more integrated care, to take a look at this annually and update it based on where we are a year from now. So we just need to get it in, and we will come back and update it a year from now with consumer input and public input.
And consumer input, public input is great. I'm glad I'm going to hold you to that commitment of bringing it back to this board. We don't usually see that on an annual basis. I think it's always nice to be able to update things, but we need to start tracking, especially as you mentioned with the children's budget and the Children's Bill of Rights and results-based accountability. Caught my eye in here, a lot of things did, but participants noted there's a minimal involvement by fathers in CWS case planning, and a lot of that was because they thought the relatively high percentage of the parents, primarily the fathers, are incarcerated during the time frame services are occurring. And what a great opportunity to work with a community correction partnership. I think you and I have talked about some mental health issues that obviously are tied to this. I mean, there's a lot of issues I brought up with probation before, and I brought up with CASA. You know, once a person, the reunification is done according to some of these plans, and I'm speaking specifically of CASA, and they're out of the court's hands, and they're with the family, there's no safety nets per se there. Or I should say there's no funds to go for continued prevention until you have to intervene again and fight the recidivism. And hopefully that can be addressed in somewhere in here too.
I think when I looked at it first, just kind of with my outsider eyes, fatherhood is, in all of our programs throughout the department, is lacking, and we need to figure out how to do that better. Incarcerated parents, we are looking at a forensic parenting program that I've used in other counties called Parenting from the Inside Out, because people who have been criminalized and incarcerated think and parent differently. So we really need to have a parenting program that speaks to how they think and their values, and work with them on being successful parents. And so we have work to do. We are interested in getting consumers involved who have been part of our system for their feedback. And we're also talking about a 2-year aftercare plan, because now the court says, okay, you're reunified and we do too, and good luck. So
Yeah.
we realize that half of the people re-enter our system, and we need to do a better job with community agencies to support them at least for a year or two after the reunification.
Great. It was one of these things that I didn't want to put it on the consent agenda.
Okay.
You know, it needs to be, it is a priority in all these other policies we have and goal committees, and so now we need to own it as well. So, and support you.
Thank you.
And I would move to approve and authorize the chair to sign.
Second that.
Further discussion? Public comment? Back to the board. Comment?
I just want to make one comment on the fatherhood issue, because I agree that any reach that a child can have to one of their parents, no matter what the parent's condition is a step in the right direction for that kiddo. And in San Mateo County, they're doing electronic visitations. So the kids aren't quite as traumatized going into the jail, and so they can do video conferencing with an absent parent. So it's just something that maybe that could be somewhere out there, I don't know. You know, and a kid who might live in Smith River that can't come to town could visit from Smith River with that parent.
We do have a couple of Skype visitations occurring with children who are placed far away, Sacramento, Fresno area, with their parents here.
And it works.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
As Chair Finnegan stated, he's 100% correct. Things like this need to take priority in our community, and we need to talk about them a lot more, because the communication to our community is what ends up getting the wheels spinning and moving forward. I really appreciate all your efforts on this. I just have one question. What is the Delnor County Blue Ribbon Commission? Is it specific to this program? I didn't recognize that.
That's for foster care.
Foster care, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Poll the vote, please.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor McClure?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Finnegan?
Yes. Brings us to item number 29, which is basically the same verbiage that we had before when we considered the board giving direction to the future facilities on In God We Trust. This is regarding E Pluribus Unum. We heard when the public spoke out regarding heritage and regarding patriotism, and there was a few people that spoke regarding E Pluribus Unum. And it is what it was. And it was sent, the In God We Trust was the board decided to send to the future facilities to decide how, where, what it was to look like and where it should be placed. And then when I picked up the newspaper, I saw that Supervisor Gitlin was quoted as having been contacted by somebody, by Pluribus Unum. I guess there was an actual committee or something, some group much like the gal from Santa Barbara, or Bakersfield rather, and said, no, we have no interest in this. And for himself, that's fine, but for the board, it's not fine. He doesn't speak on behalf of the board, and I thought, as the chair, I should at least bring it to the rest of the board to be able to weigh in the name of patriotism, heritage. You know, it was brought up what our nation was founded on, and while I think they were all God-fearing people, and we're not going to debate the In God We Trust, you know, that was something that actually came to light in the Civil War to be authorized to be placed on our money. And then again in 1956 as the national motto. But in 1776, our founding fathers at the Constitutional Convention agreed that E Pluribus Unum would be the motto on the seal, out of many one. And it struck me that that was the foundation for some of the patriotic mottos, not in competition with any other one, but that it really said something as far as the original 13 states, the colonies, relation with the federal government. Now it's with the states' relationship with the federal government. It is the counties in relationship with the state. It is our districts in relationship to our county. It is heritage in a community that has sovereign nations, Portuguese, Irish, Italian, Anglo, Hispanic. I mean, you can go right down the Hmong. And we really are a community of one out of many. And so I would ask that this board send that same message to the future facilities to take a look at it, and maybe even in the context of having a patriotic or a heritage wall where we could allow for these types of expression to be represented somewhere in the Flynn Center here. So.
And with that, there's nothing more American than baseball. And Yogi Berra has a book of sayings, so maybe we should go through those and see how many we want to post. There you go. Maybe we want to post everything we can out there.
Well, I would think that it would first have to pass muster from the board. But I tell you, Yogi's had some darn good sayings.
Yes, he has. Which is going to be my point in that we don't want to send this to future facilities without approval of accepting it from the board.
Yes. So I'm asking for the board to approve something that was talked about in 1776 in the name of heritage and patriotism and display that.
I so move.
Okay. Is there a
Sure, why not?
Okay. Further discussion?
Well, I'd like to put my opinion in on this. Yes, I was contacted, and I actually didn't. What I actually said is I did not wish him success in his e pluribus unum, and that's been on his website. I guess we can add other things, Pax Vobiscum, Weeny Weedy Wiki, anything else we want to add on our wall. I mean, this can get to a point where are we going with this? We have limited space. It's in the Flynn Center. We have approved, in God we trust. It's part of our American fabric. I don't support e pluribus unum because we will open the door for more things to be put on this wall that we are referring to. I also don't see anything justification on this, on a board report. There's no board report. It's just Chair Finnegan's report to us. I can't support this. I don't see anything that backs it up other than his verbiage right here. So I will oppose this.
I'm not sure what Ben Franklin had to say about Wee Willie Wiki, but it's not before us. Anybody else? Public comment?
Steve Perez, county resident. I support it. Let me tell you why I support it. It is part of our heritage. We cannot afford to, at this time and point in history in our country, to turn our backs on anything about our heritage. I think our children and the people that come into this building, we oftentimes need to be reminded again and again and again that we are one people. And for many of us, that includes those of us who believe in God, but it also includes those that do not. But what's really interesting in all of this is that when this nation was founded, it was born simply out of a need for people to come together, regardless of what their wealth was, regardless if they were landowners, merchants, poor, rich, everybody gained. And why did they gain? Because they worked together. And those who believed in God reached out at that particular point in time, and that too is part of our heritage. You can't separate one from the other. So, Mr. Gitlin, I think you're wrong. This is an important aspect of what we need to be doing for this county.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Elizabeth Henry from the county. I'm sure you're tired of seeing my face, but I just wanted to say I supported also. My family came here in 1951 because our country, where I was born and grew up, was taken over, and we were refugees and lived for 7 years as refugees. So the United States opened its arms to us. We were too late to go through Ellis Island, which I'm really sorry about. We came through down through the south, through Louisiana, and spent 4 days on a train. We ended up in Renton, Washington, where a church group supported us. But anyway, I have never seen a more patriotic mother and father than mine were, and displaying the flag and really feeling that they were assimilated into the community. And my dad was a doctor here, and so I think it's really important to acknowledge the people that come here who weren't born here and who are welcomed here and who make their lives here. So I think it's really a great idea to state that. Now, how many people know Latin? I don't know. My dad worked on the Brother Jonathan Memorial, and because he knew Latin because of being a doctor, and well, he checked it out, and there's an error there, and I won't tell you what it is because I don't think most people know, but the Latin is not quite correct, but this probably is, so thank you.
Thank you. I passed high school Latin. I'm not a Latin scholar, and I'm not going to go check it out. Maybe. Next, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Bill Lonsdale again. I echo the sentiments that the previous speakers have said, but I also take on board the rationale that the chair has given for approval of that particular slogan for the county, because as was pointed out, we have many, many things that want to divide us and not enough things that want to bring us together. In response to a potential negative vote on this issue, I would simply observe that he who starts the slogan movement has to live with the slogan movement. And it would not be out of line to perhaps reconsider. This is as good a slogan as anything I can think of, and it's vitally needed in this time. So why can't we have both? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, back to the board before we vote. This was not an either or. We already approved In God We Trust. This is to add in pluribus unum. Final comment?
Yeah, at the risk of opening the door much farther, and hopefully we can settle this, I do appreciate the comments from the board, and more importantly, the comments raised by Mr. Perez, Mr. Lonsdale. Very appreciated and very well timed and needed in the history of this country. I'd also encourage reconsideration if possible, if you're open to it. I think this needs to be unanimous on our parts to make this effort go forward.
And with that, we'll go ahead and poll the vote, please.
Supervisor McClure?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
No.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
And Chair Finnegan?
Yes, thank you very much, as so directed. And it's in the hands of the future facilities, and I threw it out there not as a mandate, but just as a suggestion, since I will not be attending, to look at the idea of a heritage wall out there. Anyway, with that, we got two more items. One, consider miscellaneous legislative and budget matters pertinent to the County of Del Norte. Jay, you got anything?
Budget-wise, we are in the process of meeting with each of our departments in regards to the requested budget. We do have a couple of them that have shown up already, and they are going to have to be addressed. We also have some issues that appear to be raising regarding some of the crimes that have been committed recently, which affects us on our public safety side of prosecution as well as defense, because we get to provide both of those. And we'll be looking at what we can do this fiscal year and then anticipating what might happen in the next fiscal year. A few of the departments we've already met with came in, met the budget directives, and we probably won't be meeting with them again. So we have a few of our smaller ones are done, but some of the larger ones we'll be meeting with. On the legislative side, I think Supervisor Howard is going to discuss something, and I do have some background if we need that.
Yeah. Just real briefly, in conversations with our Senator McGuire in committee, there has been Senate Bill 608, I believe, the Right to Rest Act, that would potentially negatively affect county ordinances that are in place. I would like this committee to consider supporting Senator McGuire and his objection to the specific act that's coming out of Los Angeles, but potentially CAO Serena could highlight some of the conflicts that this act brings about if it does make it to the floor.
Senator DeLue brought forward SB 608, which in theory would address the inability of certain homeless or transient people, the ability to congregate in certain areas, which are typically public lands. The proposed bill would basically take the power of a local authority away from the local government and would allow individuals to congregate virtually everywhere for purposes of sleeping, eating, resting. It appears to be something that could affect our campgrounds, obviously, and any of our parking lots in any of those areas from people taking advantage to the extreme. Now, obviously, you know, the activity regarding illegal campgrounds are typically on Florence Keller and Camp Memorial and those types of areas, and being able to address people that come in and stay beyond the time limits. This one does open the door for a number of different issues that could come out of the approval, and I think at that point I could present the analysis for the board, and then we could get a recommendation as to whether to support or to go in opposition.
Did I hear you say that you were going to bring back a recommendation as the Senate bill winds its way through the process?
I would try to get this back on the next board meeting.
Okay.
It appears to be in committee right now, and it was introduced in February, and the last time that it was actually discussed was appears April 7th. So it's in committee. I don't know how quickly it would move out. Right now it looks like it's moving slowly.
Okay, you might also check with, well, probably Kara Martinson or with CSAC, but also with Paul Smith with RCRC to see whether or not it's even going to get out of committee, whether it has legs or not, and when the appropriate time would be to weigh in. So, good. Anything else? The only thing I have on that is the Waters of the U.S. NACO just did a press release to please contact all of our federal representatives to, there's legislation to rescind the law, the current bill that's there regarding or the proposed legislation regarding Waters of the U.S. that's been put forth, and put a 2-year stay on that. It's something that we have as a board talked about several times, and how devastating that new definition of Waters of the U.S., if this was implemented, would be. You might want to take a look at that from the perspective of how we have weighed in before, if we can send a letter, and if not, bring it back on our next agenda. And with that, I'm going to ask for brief reports from fellow supervisors regarding their activities and anything that might have affected the business of the county. Supervisor Gitlin.
I think I will defer my report. I'm on my way to a visitors center, a visitors bureau meeting, so no report this week. Anybody wants to know what I did, please contact me.
Okay, Supervisor Hemmingson.
Yeah, I had a few things. I met with Lonnie, a chief probation officer. I went to the chamber mixer at the Masonic Lodge, which was very interesting. They had their version of the Shark Tank. And then later that evening went to Dancing with the Stars, where former Supervisor Sullivan showed off his dancing skills, except for the Macarena, which he couldn't quite get a handle on. Anyway, it was a great benefit for the Humane Society, and it was a lot of fun. Had a city, county 2x2, as Jay mentioned earlier, about a resolution supporting the healthcare district. Supervisor Howard and I had a 2x2 with Redwood National and State Parks. A lot of discussion on a lot of different things. And then I did have some discussion with county councils about the TPZ zoning. Had a Border Coast Regional Airport Authority meeting, and I met with Ted Ward and Rich Taylor about the solid waste budget, as well as Clint Shad.
Thank you. Supervisor McClure.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to be quick because I'm on my way to Santa Barbara. Solid waste, we had the meeting, and I think everybody's fairly well briefed on that. And then the Senior Center had its annual meeting and election of officers and appointment of the new board. I worked with Kenyon Hensel a bit, trying to help him possibly figure out without having to move, but he did have to close and he's out of business out of the harbor. I also met with Lonnie, and then Rick Hawley and I met and did the agenda for next week's solid waste meeting. And then I had a really good long conversation with Barbara Pearson over the issue of the unhoused that live in our community and how we can get our services, because currently it seems that what we do most is we just rouse them out and kind of, make them move to another place, and people call them homeless, and I call them unhoused because their home is Del Norte County. And they're part of our community, and we need to have the larger community discussion on what we're going to do. What is that? What does it look like? Because we have families that are on the street with small children, and we have our teens that are on the street because when they get kicked out of their house at 18, they don't know where to go or what to do. So I would really like to see somehow that we start to have that larger discussion as a community, and we look seriously at the issues and be honest about them. So that's something, and then I'm going to throw out one more time that I hope that we're moving on South Beach with a plan, that we're going to follow the California boating and safety regulations, and that I would still like to have a further discussion on what do we want our vacation rentals and bread and breakfast and Airbnbs, what do we want them to be in our community? How many do we want? There are some big houses that might be able to have a party for 100, but might be on a septic tank that was built 40 years ago. I don't know what we have to look at, but if we don't have the discussion, we won't be looking, and we may have issues, and I would like to get ahead of the issues. Thank you.
Supervisor Howard.
Attended Bob Stevens Memorial, longtime resident of Bayuchi. Sad to see him go, but more importantly, celebrating his life is extremely important. The CASA tournament, saw Chair Finnegan there, great day of golf and support of a really good cause. Also with Supervisor Hemmingson, the Humane Society, Dancing with the Stars, they raised a lot of great money, and it was great to see Mr. Solomon up there doing what he does best, embarrassing himself. The small chamber mixer and the Shark Tank, that was great. I hope we do that quite a bit more. And in addition, at Lonnie Raymond, did the Smith River Neighborhood Watch meeting where Supervisor Gitlin was invited to talk about his Take a Bite Out of Life program. Excellent discussion with the community, but more importantly, reflect on where the community can help participate in cleanups that our code enforcement officer missing can't get to. One thing I did want to touch on our protecting environmental resources as it relates to our Lily Ball industry, which is still on the radar and very much active in the water board's discussions. The last thing I wanted to end on, and I know Supervisor Hemmingson will be attending this evening, but recognizing Andrea Souther, who's been our NRCS programs officer here in Del Norte County for many, many, many years, and then also helped with our RCD. Very important position in this community to repopulate, because her position not only with the RCD but also with NRCS in helping to preserve water and, more importantly, soil conservation, but assisting local agricultural producers in the importance of future practices that not only help to protect the environment but make them successful businesses.
Is she leaving?
She is leaving and going back home. It's going to be a great loss, but she'll have a going away party this evening. I know the board will share their love.
Thank you. I also had a couple of meetings. First 5 Children and Families Commission meeting, attended a gen review, met with the probation department, met with the finance corps representative when she was up here meeting with county administration, attended the stakeholders meeting, Congressman Huffman, regarding last chance grade, 30 of us there, and only 1 per group. I was invited to speak the noon Rotary regarding the Board of Supervisors, what I was up to, what we were up to, and put some emphasis on the children's budget and how it related, and their questions, well, what can we do? And some of it was as simple as, well, go buy a book for $1.50, you know, and give it to a doctor or read it to a kid, or reinstitute the new foster grandparents idea as a reading club in conjunction with the library to start reading to some of our youngest children, so pre-3, so they can get that vocabulary. Anyway, it was a good meeting, well received. Airport JPA also attended the CASA Golf, helped support CASA, and had a lot of fun, and also got to spend some time with my sister from Portland and her kids and grandkids, and it was family is the root of what we do. So thank you all for your support here today and your participation, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you.